bought into the stock market back in March, there's been a 47% gain in the stock market. Was it 47, 42? 42% gain in the stock market since March. And if that's true, then are we looking at the possibility of at least the economy coming back? And when we look back at what most economists are saying today, that this recession really started back in 2007. And if it had started back then in 2007 and kind of may have hit its rock bottom in March, we are on a slope upward, considering the fact that even today, the Treasury reports that 10 banks will be allowed to pay back their TARP funds. I got to ask you, David Nelson, please, sir, and again, thank you so much, David, for being part of the show. And, of course, guys, David is the CEO of D.C. Nelson Asset Management and also the portfolio manager for them. But, David, with all these little indicators, is there not a glimmer, a glimmer of hope?
You want a glimmer? You have a glimmer, and perhaps we've hit bottom. And like I said earlier, we're not facing Armageddon anymore, and that's really to Obama's credit. A year ago we were talking about the end of the world, and now we're at least on the road to recovery somewhat, but it's going to be a long slog, Montel, because look, the millions of people that listen to you every day. All right, they're out there, and they know what I'm talking about. They have two sources of income. They have their job, their salary, and they also have their credit card. And that's being taken away from them because credit card companies are cutting their credit limits, and it makes it very, very difficult for them. And it's going to be a very tough road to hoe.
And when we take a look at this, the entire package, President Obama signed a $787 billion recovery package into law. $499 billion of it has been allocated to various programs. $75 billion of that is available to be spent right this minute. $14.5 billion of which was available of that $75 billion, which is going to really help states cope with rising Medicaid costs. Remaining $288 billion consists of tax relief. So if this $787 billion was put on top of G.W. Bush's $700 billion recovery plan, heck, we're in debt already for we're way in debt, but just in the recovery alone, it's close to $1.5 trillion.
That's absolutely correct, and that's why the U.S. dollar is at risk, and that's why, frankly, some of the best investments out there just simply aren't in this country, because other parts of the world, like China, will recover far faster than we will, because they're not running a deficit, they're running a surplus, and their consumers are eager to spend and will.
Well, let me get our senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, Mr. Christian Weller, to PhD. Thank you so much, Christian, for being with us. We're going to talk a little bit. Got to talk a little bit before I go to a break. But what do you think? Because as we look at this, we've got mixed indicators. We've got one side of the coin saying that listen to Newt Gingrich, everything's a failure. The country's a failure. Will fail for the next 4 years till we get rid of Obama. But the country really isn't failing, and we are really coming back. And we have to remember, it took us more than 3 months to get here. We had 8 months of G.W. Bush, and let's also blame a little bit of this on the Clinton administration. We had 8 years of Clinton administration that missed some regulatory things that could have been done to the Federal Trade Commission and others that could have stopped some of the other meltdown things. So, there's 16 years that led us here. We're not getting out of it in 4 months.
Well, I think that's an important point, but I think let's start with the short term here. In the short run, you do have mixed signals, like you always will have as the economy is nearing its bottom. There will be some signs that say, like, it's getting worse, and there will be some signs it's getting better. And typically, it's the stock market that turns around first, and then there will be some signs that the economy is picking up, and we've had some little signs, some inklings there in the public speaks. We call them green shoots of the economy. You had a little bit of an uptick in consumption spending in the first quarter. You have a little bit of an uptick on the investment side. But what really ails the economy right now is the labor market, and that's always the last one to turn around. And the mistake we made in 2001, 2002 was, as there were some signs that the economy was turning around, the administration and Congress back then, the Bush administration and Republican-controlled Congress, took their eye off the labor market. Said, that will take care of itself. And instead of taking care of itself, it actually continued to decline for a year and a half and never really came back. And that ultimately got us into this mess because it forced people to borrow more and more money to pay for their standard of living. And I think that's the situation we're in right now. That's exactly what Newt Gingrich is advocating, is like, let's take our eye off the labor market, even though we have continued rising unemployment and we still have major job losses.
And, when you listen to Newt, he's blaming this entire job loss thing. Remember, we were at 7.1% unemployment in December of 2008. Now we're at 9.4, and yes, you could say that, maybe this 2.3 rise, you want to blame on Obama from January to date, but you just can't. This has been part of the...
No, that's foolish politicking, and the unemployment numbers rise after the economy has tanked. So the economy tanked in 2008, and it was unavoidable that the unemployment rate was rising. And the stimulus was only enacted in February, so it couldn't have affected anything in January or February, even in March.
There are those who believe that unemployment could reach as high as 10, 10.4, 10.5. Gentlemen, what do you think? Let's start with you, David. What do you think? That's what the president's saying. He wants to put more stimulus dollars into the mix to see if that will help really, truly stimulate the economy. What do you think?
Well, first, let me say that Obama inherited probably the worst economy in perhaps 25, 30 years, and it's like a steamship. Trying to turn a steamship, very difficult. It's going to take a long time. I think the stimulus package directed towards industry and creating jobs, I think that's all well and good. Money put in the hands of the U.S. consumer is not going to find its way into the U.S. economy.
Okay, and what do you think, Christian?
Well, I think with the stimulus, you need to keep in mind that the stimulus had two parts to it. The first part, the quickest part, was putting money into hands of people, and I actually disagree a little bit with David on that one. And then the second part is what the president is now talking about, and that is the spending initiatives. The reason why I disagree a little bit with David is if you look at the numbers, if you look for the last few months, what has been happening is total income, what people receive at the top line before taxes and all of that has been basically flat or declining. But the take-home pay, the after-tax income, has actually been increasing. And the reason for that is people have been getting tax cuts, the Make Work Pay tax cut, and then the other part is they've been getting, unemployed workers have been getting more unemployment checks. And that has actually been good for the economy. If you look at just the first quarter of this year, we actually saw a little bit of an uptick in consumption spending. Everything else was going down, but consumption was going up.
Well, I can tell you this now, just me alone, and maybe this is not really a good gauge, but if you happen to be in the New York tri-state area in the last 2 weekends alone, I'm going to tell you, 4 weeks ago, stores were empty. I mean, you could go down 6th Avenue and you didn't see people. Now, I'm going to tell you, the last 2 weeks in a row, you can't walk. And if you were on the New Jersey Turnpike stopping in any one of the malls, the shopping centers, any place, people are out spending. I'm seeing people walk out of stores carrying bags, albeit they may just be spending $50, $60, but they're spending money. So is that a true indicator? They're not spending all of the money. David is right that some of the money is going into savings, people holding on to it, but people are spending more money than they did before, and it's certainly turning things around. The problem with that is it's a quick way of getting money into the economy. It's not the most efficient way of getting money into the economy. What the president is now talking about is spending money on helping states maintain their education system. He's talking about a big program, youth employment program for the summer, so that that you basically get young people where we have an unemployment rate of almost 23%. We get them off the street, we give them job training, we give them job skills, while hopefully the economy is turning around. Those kinds of things are very efficient. They don't cost much money. They have a good bang for the buck for the economy, and they're necessary because that's really targeted towards the labor market and getting the economy to grow, but that does take some time, and so that's why the stimulus was designed in this kind of two-step fashion, that you first give the consumer some checks through tax cuts and better unemployment insurance, and then you start government spending on investment programs that can really help where it's most needed at the state level, at the most vulnerable populations, and that's what we're seeing now. And I think the president is right to put a lot more pressure on his government, on the federal government, on the state and local governments to put the money into the economy more quickly.
But we knew from the beginning it would take some time, and you got to remember the stimulus is an 18-month project. It was never meant to be spent in 3 months. So we're I think generally on track, but I commend the president to be critical publicly and make those statements and say, like, look, this is not as good as it could be, and we have more work to do.
Yes, sir.
Montel, you're seeing pent-up demand as well. You know, the consumer retrenched so far in the first quarter this year that eventually they've got to spend some money. But at some point in time, these new dollars that they're seeing in their pocket, it's got to go to repair their balance sheet. And you're seeing the printing presses go, but that's going to reflect itself in our dollar and inflation, and all these are problems that are being laid to roost sometime in our future.
Montel across America.